Hey, how's it going, guys? Mr. Boss for the win here, and in today's Grand Theft Auto 5 video, we're going to be taking a look at the top 15 cars and vehicles that are forgotten about and that you barely ever see anymore in Grand Theft Auto Online. So before we start this, I did this video over a year ago, and it's one of the best videos I've done on my channel. And one thing I want to say is, just because a car is forgotten or you barely see it, doesn't mean it's bad. We're just discussing today the fact that you don't see a lot of these vehicles and you do see a ton of other cars. So we had 15 that we did in that video. We're going to be doing 15 today. And as always, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments section down below. Let me know what you think are some of the most forgotten about or underappreciated or underrated vehicles that you never see anymore in online. Well, out of the way, let's not waste any more time and let's get it started. The first one on our list today is the Infernus. So back in 2013 and 14, you saw Infernuses all over the place. And maybe it's because this car has literally been in like every GTA from Vice City. That's why it's not as valued anymore. But it's also because Rockstar have gotten a ton of supercars. And when they've added a bunch of these supercars, the Infernus has just gotten buried. I mean, they added basically two retro versions of the Infernus, the Diablo and the Countach, and you probably see more of those than you do the regular Infernus, which is pretty crazy. So this is one of those supercars that has not stood the test of time and hasn't really made a resurgence, or I guess really hasn't lasted into 2015, 16, and now 2017. So that's the first one on our list today, the Infernus. The second one is the Biffed. So this is like the oldest DLC car. This came out with the Beach Bum update, and man, this car is old. It's fun, but you never really see anyone just like casually driving on the beach or off-roading in a Biffed. There's better off-road vehicles like the trophy trucks and the Coil Brawler, and so you don't see the Biffed being utilized all that much. It's basically a glorified go-kart, and so you don't see it all that much. But back in like 2013 when the Beach Bum came out, that was the craze. Everyone had a Biffed, and it was really cool. So that's the second vehicle on our list today. The third one is the Cognoscenti Cabrio. So I think this vehicle doesn't get a whole lot of love because it doesn't really do anything all that well. It doesn't have a lot of customization. It's in the coupe category, and for the most part, it doesn't do anything, like I said, all that great. So I actually kind of like this vehicle. It's Poppy Mitchell's car from the single-player game, which is kind of cool, but no one drives the Cognoscenti Cabrio. They're either doing the armored Cognoscenti 55, or they're doing some other variation of a luxury car like this. It doesn't fit in as like a coupe or a luxury car or anything like that. So that's definitely another reason why it's one of the most forgotten vehicles in online. That's the Cognoscenti Cabrio. The number 4 spot, the Entity XF. So this is the only overflawed car we have in the game, and I think it's a shame that this vehicle has been forgotten. In fact, this car brand in-game has been forgotten. We really do need another overflawed vehicle, and even though the Entity is unique and it looks cool, it hasn't really stood the test of time because there's been so many other supercars added. It's kind of fallen into the same trap as the Infernus. So many other better supercars with more customization have come out that you really have just kind of forgotten about this one. So I would love to see a new version of an overflawed, but until then, I think the Entity XF and the overflawed brand is going to be one of the most forgotten about here in Grand Theft Auto Online. So that right there is our fourth car on the list today. The fifth car on our list today is the Chameleon. So the Chameleon is actually an electric sports car, and the reason you don't see a lot of these is I believe this is actually one of the collector's edition items. So if you bought the regular version of the game, you wouldn't get this car. You had to get one of the upgraded or like more expensive versions of the game when it came out. And even if you do have it, it's not all that great of a car. Rockstar didn't make it all that awesome. Obviously, it's electric. It doesn't really go all that great. I think there's kind of a stigma for electric cars in this game where people don't necessarily love them all that much. And we'll see in a little bit when the Coil Cyclone comes out that it will probably have the same effect on that. But the Chameleon doesn't get a whole lot of love, and it's a pretty cool car with some unique features. I think it has like solar panels on the top of it or something like that. It's got some unique design. That's all I know. So unfortunately, the Chameleon doesn't get a whole lot of love. It's kind of a weird brand to hijack as well, which doesn't have a whole lot of vehicles in the game either. That's the 5th one on our list. The 6th one is a sports car, the Grotty Carbon. Now, this vehicle you see a lot being driven by the NPCs, but I never see anyone driving a customized Grotty Carbon. For me, it was one of the first sports cars I actually bought. I didn't know how bad it was, but I love the fact that it was a convertible. I thought that was pretty cool. In fact, it's one of the few sports cars we have in the game that are convertibles. So it does have some unique features to it, but there's just a whole lot of other better sports cars. And when you think of Grotty, when you think of Ferrari, you're thinking supercars. So it's kind of like the odd one out of the Grotty family. So that's why you probably don't see it all that much, is because everyone's focused on the other way better Grotty vehicles. But the Carbon is certainly one of those that you see all the NPCs driving and you're like, oh, that's kind of a nice NPC car, but never would you see a normal person driving one of those. So that's the 6th one on our list today. At the number 7 spot, we have the regular Coil Voltage. So back in the early days, actually a lot of people drove the Coil Voltage because it was a relatively cheap supercar that you could buy for not a whole lot of money. It had nice acceleration, but then a bunch of other supercars started to come out. We got the addition of the Rocket Voltage, which is definitely more popular now and has pretty much killed the Voltage. And we're also going to be getting a new electric supercar soon, the Coil Cyclone, which is also going to put the Coil pretty much to bed. So expect the final nail in the coffin for the Coil Voltage coming soon. It really just doesn't have a use anymore, even though it's so incredibly cheap. The fact that it isn't competitive and the fact that now there's other electric vehicles out there really just puts to bed this vehicle. So that's why the Coil Voltage is one of those forgotten about ones as well. At the number 8 spot, we have the ZType. Now, the ZType was really impressive when the game first came out, in 2013, 2014. Not only was it the most expensive vehicle in single player, but it was also a really good sports classic car. It doesn't have the best turning and acceleration, but in a straight line, that thing can go. And even today, I think it's the fastest sports classic vehicle. But we've got a ton of other sports classic cars that have come out. The Sterling GT, Turismo Classic, Cheetah Classic, Infernus Classic. They really just put this to bed. And that's why you don't see it all that much anymore. Is it a beautiful, awesome vehicle? Yes, I think it's amazing. One of those Bugatti Atlantic cars that just looks so awesome. But do you see them a lot in online? Not really. You really see more of the Turismos, the Cheetahs, Infernus Classic, stuff like that. At the number 9 spot, the Dubsta 6x6. I remember when this vehicle came out in the I Am Not a Hipster update, I thought it was amazingly cool. And I still think it's really cool, but it just seems to be one of those forgotten about vehicles. You never see this out anymore. Maybe it's because there's better off-road muscle vehicles like this, whether it's the Insurgent or the trophy truck. That, to me, my opinion, is the only reason, because it's still relatively cheap for what it is. $250,000, that's not all that bad. It has really great customization, actually, but it just seems to be forgotten about. You never see this vehicle in lobbies anymore, and it was probably the highlight of the I'm Not a Hipster update. So it is kind of interesting to see a giant like this really come down to earth and fall. But again, I haven't driven one of these things in years. And when I was going through the comments of the previous video, someone said, dude, what about the Dubsta 6x6? And I was like, oh my God, it has been ages since I've seen one of those. So that's why I wanted to include it on this list. It's a really cool car, but it just seems to be completely forgotten about. At the number 9 spot, the Obey 9F. So this was the first vehicle I drove in GTA 5, because I'm pretty sure in the very first mission you have an option to steal this car. And I fell in love with it. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is the Audi R8. This is awesome. But it didn't get a whole lot of love. It has a convertible version, a regular version, and that's pretty much it. It isn't that great of a sports car. It doesn't have a ton of customization. In my Benny's vehicle video I made a couple days ago, I stated it would be awesome as a Benny's variant. If it did, then you might see it a little bit more. But until then, it just seems to be one of those run-of-the-mill sports cars that really isn't all that great at anything, doesn't have good customization or top performance. So that's why it's pretty much one of those forgotten vehicles in online. Speaking of forgotten sports cars, at the number 11 spot, the Benefactor Serrano. Does anyone even own one of these things? I mean, it's a convertible sports car, which again is kind of interesting, but it doesn't have a hard top variant. So in my opinion, it doesn't look all that great, and I know for a fact it doesn't perform all that great. I mean, I'm not even too sure how many people are watching this video know what a Serrano is, because it is seriously one of just the worst vehicles we got. So maybe the Serrano would be cool if it had some extra upgrades and stuff like that, but it's just one of the worst benefactor sports cars we have in the game when you compare it to other stuff like the Feltzer. So anyways, that right there is another one of those vehicles. And speaking of the Feltzer, the number 12 spot, that's actually the vehicle right after this, the Feltzer. Now, the Feltzer does a lot of things really great. It's actually an awesome performing sports car. It has a ton of upgrades. I mean, as far as vehicles with mods go, the Feltzer is one of those ones where it's like, dang, that car has a ton of upgrades to it, like a surprising amount. Yet you never see this car out. When people jump to sports cars, they're always like, give me the LG, it's free. Give me the Massacre, give me the Jester, they're really fast. No one seems to want to jump for the Feltzer, and I'm not sure if it's because it's not a DLC vehicle and people don't like that, or if it just has some weird stigma to it. I'm really not all that sure, but not a lot of people are jumping for this vehicle, and for whatever reason, it's awesome. I loved this vehicle in GTA 4. I love it now in GTA 5. You just don't ever see it on the road, which is really strange given everything it's pretty good at. At the number 13 spot today, the ProGen GP1. So this was like the marquee supercar and vehicle that came out with Cunning Stunt's special vehicle circuit. So not only was this entire DLC, in my opinion, a total flop, I didn't enjoy it at all, but the supercar was an embarrassment. It's based off of one of the greatest vehicles of all time, the McLaren F1. Now, does it have some awesome customization? Yeah, but its performance sucks, and that's a real bummer because when you're buying a supercar, you want it to have some pretty awesome performance, and the GP1 just totally flops in that department. So the really only reason to buy this is for like car shows and collections and whatnot, because you're never going to use it in races and be successful. So unfortunately, one of the best cars in real life got a pretty awful port into Grand Theft Auto Online. I still love the GP1 because it's cool, but it's just not all that great performance-wise, which is a huge bummer. At the number 14 spot, we've got the Monroe. So the Monroe is a sports classic vehicle that you don't see a lot either. Now, I personally like the Monroe. It has an awesome look to it, but you don't see this at all in any regard. And the last one I'm going to be talking about as well, these kind of fall into like sports classic purgatory. They're cool cars, but you just never see them. So the Monroe, and then the last one we're going to be talking about, all three versions of like the Stinger. The Stinger convertible, and the Stinger GT. First of all, why does there need to be three different versions? Rockstar could have just made one with various upgrades, and they all have different prices for them. So that's kind of a pain if you're trying to complete like a collection. So that's maybe one of the reasons people just see the Stinger and be like, there's three options here. Oh, you know, why would I select any of them? So maybe that's one of the reasons why. I'm not entirely too sure. But the Monroe and the Stinger are those two vehicles that you just never see. In fact, if you did see them in an online lobby, you'd probably think to yourself, what the heck is that car? Is it new? You know, let me check this out. You might not have even known that it's been in the game since day one. So again, that right there is a little bit unfortunate, but I still think they're beautiful cars. You just don't see a whole lot of love for them in online. But anyways, those are the top 15 forgotten about, underappreciated, and underused vehicles and cars that you barely see anymore in Grand Theft Auto Online. Let me know if you have anything to add to this list in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear from you guys down there. If you did go and enjoy this video, though, a like rating would, of course, be awesome. And also, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are new, or you like daily GTA 5 videos like this. With all the way, guys, like I said, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.